I wrote the adventure around a theme of cosmic horror that made me personally feel the kind of existential dread that the genre is known for. And that was the multiverse interpretation of quantum theory. Not only are we like a speck of dust in an incomprehensible large universe, but there is also an innumerable number of parallel versions of us. Just great. It all began when I won a prize competition from my local radio station. A 2-week holiday on the island of Nantucket. Since I could really use a holiday, I packed my things and headed off for port. I put a lot of effort into this adventure, so I had 2 envelopes prepared I handed to my players that contained the letters from the radio stations as well as their ship tickets. I don't think my players noticed at this point that they had won the exact same prize competition. The ship ride to Nantucket was uneventful, and the hotel was only a short walk away from port. The place seemed like it had seen better times, probably needed the publicity it got from the prize competition, but the landlady seemed nice and the rooms were clean. It all went wrong during the first night. At around 2 in the morning, I woke up. There was someone sleeping beside me in the bed. At exactly 2.23 hours, the PCs met for the first time. Until that point, they had not realized they had checked into the exact same hotel room. They caused a big scene, woke the landlady, who couldn't remember either of them, and she called the sheriff. A short while later, Sheriff Woodville and his deputy Stegweather arrived, and at this point my players opted to go for diplomacy. So they resolved the scene, and the sheriff and the landlady agreed to let them stay the night, and the sheriff would come back in the morning and they would all try to resolve the situation together. But the sheriff did not come in the morning. At least the landlady remembered me again, and I talked about it with the other guy back in my room. We decided to head to the sheriff's station together. But Sheriff Woodville and Deputy Starkweather did not remember either of us, or that there had been anything going on last night. I played around with different versions of the places in Nantucket the players could investigate. I also had some places of convergence that always stayed the same, so the PCs could reunite when they got separated. I made a point of letting them find contradicting clues and even placed a few false leads. But my players have played a few Call of Cthulhu adventures before, so they didn't follow any of my false leads and eventually followed the right lead to the likely cause of the strange events. We eventually found out that the Miskatonic University had built a research station on the North Cape of the island a few years ago. Supposedly, a guy named Nikola Tesla was doing some top secret research there. We found that the room next to my hotel room was rented by a student who worked in that research station, but he had been missing for at least a few days. We reached the research station at night. The lights were still on, but it seemed completely deserted. There wasn't even a guard. As soon as we went inside, I got separated from the other guy. I looked around for him, but couldn't find him. Instead, I found a student, but he seemed confused. He didn't know that anything out of the ordinary was going on. When I went to get the other guy to also talk to the student, he was just gone when I came back. While searching through the station, I found some phonograph wax cylinders and eventually a phonograph to play them on. There was a science guy speaking on them, talking about electrons in some double slit experiment. Didn't make much sense to me. Also, the guy was contradicting himself, telling something different on each cylinder. As the PCs went through the research station, I separated them at the first opportunity to put on the pressure. The station was in constant flux throughout the multiverse, and I'm really proud about the clues I let them find. I had some fun making them in little sound snippets I played to my players one by one. Here's an example of one of them.
Es ist so, dass nicht nur das eine Elektron, das wir auf den Doppelspalt beschleunigen, existiert, sondern dass zeitgleich in anderen Quantenwelten viele Elektronen auf diesen Spalt beschleunigt werden. Und mit diesen Elektronen aus anderen Quantenwelten interferiert unser einzelnes Elektron. Nun brauchen wir diese anderen Quantenwelten nicht unbedingt. Wir könnten uns die Energie dieser Elektronen also zunutze machen.
Eventually, I let the PCs meet up in the only point of convergence in the research station. I found the other guy in the station's observatory. There was no one else there besides us. There was this huge telescope pointing at the night sky. It had this kind of directional radio antenna coaxial to the telescope, and it was just as large as the telescope. The radio equipment was still running. It was constantly recording some kind of signal onto a roll of graph paper, and there were dozens of meters of the stuff piling up beneath the printer. Wondering where that signal came from, I looked through the telescope, but there was nothing to see. I checked if I'd made any mistakes, but no. Apparently, the telescope was pointed off a completely empty patch of sky. We found another phonograph cylinder in the observatory. On it, the science guy explained how their transatlantic radio station had picked up a radio signal they could not explain.
Elektromagnetischer Wellen empfing unsere Station zur transatlantischen Kommunikation in Aachen folgendes unerklärliches Signal.
I don't remember where I found it, but supposedly it is a real radio signal from outer space. It sounds creepy as hell anyways. From what little clues we found, we pieced together that Nikola Tesla was working on some kind of free energy generator that would draw power from parallel universes. In the office of the station's director, we found some plans showing the generator built on a ship. There was a pair of binoculars, and when we looked through, we found that just a bit offshore there were the signal lights of a ship that was anchored there. We also saw a boat tied to a pier at the bottom of the research station. So, we headed out to sea. It was a good thing that the ship had its position lights on, or else we wouldn't have seen it at all. It was surrounded by a thick fog that came from the water itself. It seemed to be boiling, it was bubbling, but it was not hot. The ship looked strange as well. Like it wasn't really there, like a ghost ship. That cleared up when we got closer though, and when we moored the boat onto the gangway of the ship, it was made of good solid steel. I played around with quantum mechanics here, letting the quantum effects bleed into the macroscopic world. The ship was in constant quantum flux and didn't have a fixed position in space or time until the PCs came close enough to actually measure it. Only then did the ship settle in one specific quantum state and they could investigate it. We began searching the ship. It was apparently empty. It was eerily quiet. It was only this hum of something down below deck. The first sign of the crew that we found was a huge blood splatter all over the floor and the walls of the corridor. Yet there was no body. Eventually we found a lone sailor down in his cabin. He seemed confused, just like the student had been, and also didn't seem to know anything strange was going on. But at least he could tell us that Nikola Tesla was running some strange machinery down in the hold. Truth be told, I can't find my notes on this part of the adventure. The page where it's supposed to be has been ripped out from my notebook, and neither of my two players remember the adventure too well. But I still got my notes on the monster. The cargo hold below was dark and we made our way through torches. Then I saw something move in the shadows and dozens of arms just shot out of it. I was too slow to evade. It grabbed me. Suddenly I found myself in an empty void. I was falling. My chest collapsed. I couldn't breathe. My body hurt all over. I think I died there. But I also remember getting away from that thing and how I saw another version of myself getting pulled into the darkness, just vanish. I still have nightmares. My monster, the Velaconian, had been lured to this place by Tesla's experiments. It's a creature with a body of wobbling shadows, a pointy head and tentacles. It has the ability to switch between the different realities of the multiverse freely, and it uses that when it grabs a victim. It changes together with the victim into a reality where there's no Earth, and its victim will be unconscious within 90 seconds of exposure to the vacuum of space, at which point the Velaconian can devour it without a struggle. If you attack it, it can just switch into a different reality to avoid the attack. So it was absolutely deadly. When a character didn't avoid a single attack, I described how his character died in the vacuum of space. Then I described how he avoided the attack by the narrowest of margins, but saw himself getting dragged off into the darkness. The player could just go on and play a different version of the character from a reality where he had made that role. So the adventure could continue. But the character still took a massive hit to their sanity. We eventually made it to the generator. It was a monstrosity of pipes and coils. The other guy was some sort of brain, so I let him handle how to switch off the generator, while I went and tried distracting the monster so he could work. There were at least 3 different versions of the generator based on 3 different theories that were interfering with each other. I tried switching them off one by one, but the muscle guy, he didn't manage to distract the monster long enough. So in the end, I just pulled the main switch and the whole thing exploded in every reality. Blew apart the generators, the ship, the monster, and us. I ended the adventure by describing how the characters spent a nice and relaxing holiday on the quiet island of Nantucket. This is the end of my story and the horror series, for now. I hope you had some fun with these videos. Thanks for watching and goodbye.